ReZero is far and above my favorite series, and a series that I honestly personally consider the best series within all of media. However, taking that into account, it is to be said that ReZero is not perfect. There are flaws with the series, and there are personal issues that I have with what goes on, not just within the series, but the things around it. And that's exactly what this video is going to be about today. I want to address some of my biggest complaints and problems within ReZero and the community around it. For a series that I personally consider amazing, there is a lot to be said that some will not mention. So yeah, let's get right into the video. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe, and yeah. For starters, I want to talk about an issue that a lot would honestly not consider an issue, but I would beg to differ in many ways. And that issue is going to be the amount of side content there is within ReZero and the Q&As. On one hand, the side content and the Q&As are something that are really cool and unique about ReZero. The fact Tappe is so in touch with his fans and willing to answer so many questions about what is going on within the ReZero world is something that is really interesting and something that a lot of people really do love. But when you get something like this, it leads to a good amount of flaws within the main story itself. This being that so much of ReZero's lore and information and stuff that circulates the community is honestly hard to attain for the average fan. If you go up to the average ReZero fan, they often have a very misguided understanding of what is actually going on, and this has honestly led to rampant misinformation within the ReZero community and has led to people saying a lot of really stupid things that don't really make sense. And if we're just being completely honest, a good amount of this is to blame from Tappe. Because it's not like this side content is easily accessible too. With this side content, a lot of the time, it is locked behind a paywall at very niche and specific stores within Japan. The greatest example of this is something I've talked about a million times at this point, but it is the Isekai Quartet movie, and Tappe's willingness to put very important lore within that movie, or at least what we consider very important lore. That being, including the fact that Hoshin is not actually from Earth. He was somebody who, all the way up until pretty recently within the series, and within the fandom, was speculated to be from Earth, along with Subaru, Flugel, and Ao. But with the reveal within the Isekai Quartet movie, it is shown that he is not, and he actually learned his knowledge about Earth from Flugel. Now, you may think this really isn't that big of a deal, and just a bit of side content that is kind of funny, kind of important, but the speculation about who is actually from Earth within ReZero is pretty important to the main narrative. At least that's what we think, especially as the series is progressing towards Arc 9. So this reveal that, Hoshin is not actually from Earth, and instead got his knowledge from Flugel, who, as we know, Flugel, Ao, and Subaru all have connections to each other and are very theorized and speculated within the fandom to be the same person. The confirmation that Hoshin is not from Earth kind of points to the fact that, those people who are speculated to be the same person are the only ones who are actually from Earth. And like I said, Tappe revealed this within side content that is not even canon or continuous within the main series of ReZero, within the Isekai Quartet movie. I mean, it's literally like a chibi version of the series. But yeah, this amount of side content is leading me to one of my major points, and that being that another big flaw about ReZero, which this kind of correlates, I mean, it goes hand in hand together, is the fact that ReZero is honestly not a self-contained story. Tappe has an extreme willingness to put, like I said, important information and expand on a lot of characters within side content. A lot of people wouldn't necessarily view this as a flaw because this side information makes a lot of the characters more interesting, and it is to be said that Tappe obviously doesn't have all the time in the world within the main arcs, and he needs to address main points. Side content within itself is not bad, but when important information starts getting addressed within side content that you need to know for the main series, and this is honestly not that bad, like this problem itself, for the first couple of arcs. All the way up until Arc 6, it's pretty intuitive, but when Tappe got around to Arc 7, this is when the side content somewhat started to get rampant. Without going into too much spoilers, a major character within Arc 7 is Priscilla and her connections with a certain character within the Valachian Empire, and a lot of this is hard to infer by just reading the main story of ReZero. You need to infer it by also reading the side content, in which it's expanded on heavily, especially within EX, volume 5 or 6, I don't remember which one. Which, like I said, without getting into much spoilers, you need to read the side stories a lot of the time to keep up with the main cast and what's going on with them, and how they inevitably show up within the series. Without reading the side content, they kind of just appear. On top of this, I want to talk about the Q&As a bit, which, like I said, the Q&As and the side stories are cool stuff, but Tappe has kind of gone and told a lot of stuff about ReZero and a lot of future stuff and a lot of stuff that has led to speculation that could honestly be indicative of spoilers and indicative of what is going to happen within later arcs of the series. Tappe does so many Q&As, and in which these Q&As, he does not hold back a lot of the time, and he reveals some information that is very important, in which, like I said, it is cool for the fans and it is a cool thing to see. Like, at the end of the day, it's not that big of a deal, and this flaw is not anything that's crazy with the story itself. itself. But like when you go ahead and proclaim something within a Q&A, such as saying that, you know, why must love fade is the final boss's words, and then have Echidna say it within like arc 4, it kind of spoils, you know, like there's a good chance Echidna is probably going to be the final boss. And Tappei could be, you know, red herring and stuff like that and saying this, you know, to throw in a bone for the fans and confuse us, which he has done before. Tappei has switched up on a lot of side content that he has said, or better said, a lot of Q&A content. Like stuff he has said within the past, he has contradicted within the Q&As. This is actually another thing I want to touch up upon. With Tappei saying certain stuff within Q&As in the past, it leads to a perception and an idea within the series. But for him to contradict that within, you know, later arcs and later series, it makes it look like a bit of a retcon, although it's not, because all he's doing is answering it within a Q&A. Within the main story, this stuff is never directly addressed. But to get to my main point about this whole thing is that ReZero has an extremely expansive world, but the big problem with it is that to actually experience and understand this expansive world and all the stuff that is going on with it, and get, you know, a real look at a lot of characters and, you know, their backstory and what's really going on, like Wilhelm or Theresia, for example, you need to read the side content. The story within itself is not self-contained, and it would be agreed upon by a lot of fans within the ReZero community that just reading the main arcs 1 through 8 or whatever, or 1 through 9 would not give you the full experience of ReZero. You have to read the side content to actually fully get the full experience and full gratitude of a lot of the side characters within the main series. And on top of this, with Tappei addressing, you know, important lore within the side content, the only way that most fans can actually experience this is by word of mouth. And when you have this, you know, game of telephone where you only spread content and information and lore and information by word of mouth, it leads to a very expansive and broad and undefinable, you know, description of what is actually going on. In other words, people start lying and adding their own twists and bits of information to it, which leads to a lot of big misunderstandings within the community, which leads to people, you know, putting stuff within edits that don't make any sense. You know, it's just a whole cycle. It's a whole spiral. This together is personally what I consider the biggest flaw within ReZero. I know it's nothing too crazy, but like I said, ReZero is literally my favorite series. I love it more than anything. So don't get mad at me. I don't think the series has like any crazy major flaws, or else it wouldn't be. That, as of right now, is what I personally consider the biggest flaw with the series and the biggest problem moving forward, because when you have this problem of putting stuff inside content, it just leads to a whole cycle, a game of telephone, and expands down to fans not really knowing what they're talking about. And, you know, the Q&As and the trivia and all of this leads to a lot of fake readers. Which brings me to my second point, and this one isn't of ReZero itself. It's not indicative of the series itself, although this issue honestly does stem from the way Tappei writes the series and the amount of side content and trivia and Q&As he answers, and that is the fake reader problem we have with ReZero and the community. So many ReZero fans actually have no idea what the hell they are talking about. I mean, it's to a point where you will have the stupidest edits with the stupidest stuff that address nothing to do with the main series and are saying the stupidest thing. On TikTok, a lot of people ask, oh, how do you read ReZero? Where do you read ReZero? And you will see people like replying with, oh, read the manga. Like, I don't know if they know the manga is literally behind the anime, but yeah, it's to that point. Or the misunderstanding people get with the if routes in the main series and mixing up Subaru. Like, I keep seeing on TikTok, like, the same edit of someone going, the man who made Pride lose his pride or something like that, like, referring to Subaru, when it's like, Subaru never even faced Pride. I don't know where that could have possibly stemmed from. Pride's been gone for, like, literally, like, years within ReZero. Yeah, this fake reader epidemic with ReZero has genuinely led to so many problems, and it's honestly built upon the fact of that misinformation and the, side stories and the amount of side content Tappei chooses to put out there without addressing the main series, because people will just read these Q&As and assume they know what's going on and what's happening and stuff like that with later arcs. But then you actually ask them, like, oh, what happens here? And it's like, I don't know. Like, so that's more on the fandom aspect. But one more flaw I want to address about ReZero is the character design and the art. At the least, the artist for ReZero he's not bad, but he's not amazing. ReZero's character design is very interesting and iffy, to say the least. I mean, a lot of people have been pointing out lately, and especially with this current arc, is the artist and how he draws the legs within ReZero. It got pointed out to me, and now it's something that, like, I can't unsee. He draws legs like horse legs. Like, it looks like wrong. Like, it doesn't look right. On top of this, ReZero has a lot of, like, Gunnar-esque character designs and definitely interesting aspects, with that. Which delving into that, kind of cringy Gunnar-esque aspect of ReZero, that is a problem that I actually do have with the writing itself. And the fact Tappei kind of leads into that idea of, harems and all the girls within ReZero, really liking Subaru at times is something that I am not a big fan of. If I'm being honest, the humor with that just doesn't land for me, and I think it's a bit corny, but it's not the worst thing in the world, and it's very easy to look past, especially when you'll get like the most amazing character dialogue literally right after that. Moving away from all of that though, another flaw I want to talk about within ReZero is the pacing of the novels at times. Going into an actual story writing element and into Tappei's writing, I would say his pacing is probably his biggest flaw. There are times and moments where the pacing of ReZero just feels off, especially after Arc 6. Arcs 1 through 6, the pacing is actually honestly really good, especially within Arc 6. Arc 6 has amazing pacing, builds up amazing, ends amazing. Arc 5, just straight up like that. The pacing is great. These arcs have very good pacings. 1, 2, 3, very good pacing. I think this is an issue Tappei has gone into recently, although I think he's reeled it back in a bit with Arc 9. But for a bit there within Arc 7 and Arc 8, and specifically Arc 7, there was moments where it felt like the story was going nowhere. It felt like Tappei would introduce us to something, have it have a bunch of build-up, a bunch of consequences, and then almost within a sense retcon it and just kind of like progress forward and move completely to something else. I love Arc 7, and I think Arc 7 was amazing build-up for what was eventually Arc 8 and the ending that Arc 8 presented, but I think this build-up just took so long for so many fans, and in Japan, Arc 7 was actually a very divisive arc, and a lot of fandoms left the community. Tappei, obviously, small spoilers ahead, but it's more focused on Subaru and people within another country, and there's not the main cast really that present, but I mean they are in the side content, but that's again going back to that side content flaw. You have to read the side content to really keep up with them. But there are times where it kind of feels like you're running in circles within Arc 7 and you're like, okay, like when is this gonna end? Like, when are we moving on? And it just kind of like doesn't, it just keeps going and going and going and chugging. And that's because I think Tappei wrote himself into a bit of a hole with Arc 7. As we know, that wasn't originally planned for the series, and Tappei kind of decided on the whim of the moment that he was going to do that and expand the ReZero world, because, if he wouldn't include other countries within the ReZero world and the ReZero story, it would definitely look a bit interesting. Overall, I think Arc 7 and Arc 8 were amazing, but like I said, they do suffer from these pacing issues at times. And the fact that I do see the common complaint that a lot of people feel like the point and the events of Arc 7, especially like a good amount of it, didn't really matter, to say the least, to the main story. It felt like side content within the main story and felt like it was really not going to have that many implications upon what happened, which I personally disagree and I think was very interesting, but it is a point that people do have, and I do see where they are coming from in some aspect. Especially the fact that so many characters were introduced within Arc 7, and now that we are kind of back with the main cast within Arc 9, it feels like a lot of these characters' introduction and story were kind of not pointless, but like they're not gonna have any overall impact upon the main series. It kind of runs nowhere, How I kind of think of it is, if you have an anime that is based off of manga and you get an anime original movie where it introduces some, sort of side character that is important for the movie, but the second that movie ends, you barely see them really within the main series again. And that's just kind of how it has to be at times. ReZero is such an expansive series with so many expansive characters. There's only so much Tappei could do with all these side characters. I mean, ReZero's not the only series that struggles from this. It's literally any long-running series. One Piece, Naruto, you're gonna just eventually have to have some characters get sidecasted. That's just the way it is. The events of Arc 7 and Arc 8 make me want to talk about another point, and this one is going to be that gluttony is kind of a crutch for the series. What I mean by this is that Tappei clearly doesn't like writing death. Well, outside of Subaru, obviously, but outside of Subaru, there has only been really 1 or 2 permanent deaths I can distinctly think of off the top of my head, which is honestly a given, because characters within ReZero are not supposed to die. Subaru is supposed to return by death, which I don't think having characters not die that often is a flaw inherently, because when you have characters not die that often, to say the least, it leaves more impact for when they do, especially with an ability like Return by Death. Like, that is amazing. But I could definitely see how some people could get frustrated after this for a bit and feel like there's no real implications of what's going on. But like I said, that's where the gluttony crutch comes in. When you have a character like Gluttony who can eat a character's names and memories, it inherently causes death within a metaphorical sense, as that person's whole existence and identity is erased. And we know that type of stuff is very important within ReZero. I guess that's not really a flaw, it's more so just a writing crutch crutch, something I noticed that Tappei heavily leans on at times and has been for almost the entire series. It feels like gluttony almost has a much more higher importance than any other Sin Archbishop or any other, witch factor within ReZero. So it just makes it feel like the writing and the uniqueness of all the, authorities and Sin Archbishops is a bit uneven. Not really a flaw, but just something I personally noticed and am not an amazing fan of. That about does it for the video. Those are my biggest complaints and problems with ReZero, in which a lot of these are debatably not even problems, and I'm sure you guys will argue with me within the comments and tell me I'm crazy and explain to me why this is actually a good thing and not a bad thing, but it's just my personal feel towards the series at times and how certain things left me feeling. What do you guys think? What are your biggest complaints with ReZero? Again, keep in mind this is my favorite series and a series I consider to be the literal best within fiction, so I'm not hating on it. Like I'm not trying to be like that. Like I literally love ReZero. I just think it's good to address certain problems you have with the things you love and not look at it with completely blind eyes. So what are your biggest problems with ReZero? Let me know in the comments below. Oh yeah, one more thing I wanted to mention. I got contacts. I usually can't see anything when I record these videos because I'm supposed to wear glasses, but when I have like a ring camera or whatever, obviously you can't, you can see the reflection of it within the glasses and it's just it's a whole pain in the neck. But now I can actually see and look at something. So hopefully I was looking at the camera more within this video because I know I usually look around like this, like dauntingly, and it's because I don't really know what to focus on. But yeah, anyways, I'm rambling. Peace out, guys. Thank you guys for watching. Wait, one more thing. Thank you for 1,000 subscribers. Okay, actually now, peace.